So many of you may have seen already at least reports about what happened to George Floyd. That was last Monday, and in speaking for myself, I didn't see the video until Tuesday night. I saw it at night, and I couldn't sleep. Tuesday to Wednesday, I did not leave my house until Saturday. I felt every range of emotion, from anger and fear, and I was upset and I was sad. And I don't know if you have seen the video. I saw the video and it rocked me to the core after seeing it. And I was not even in a position to talk about it until recently. What I did over the weekend on Saturday, I went for a hike. I went with 2 college roommates, and that was very good for me. I needed that space to just breathe and be outside in nature and just kind of process and be with familiar people, right? I was with old friends of mine. It was something that was just good for my processing, and it wasn't until the weekend that I was even in a place where I could start to talk to you about it. You know, it's that old idea of putting your own oxygen mask on first before you can even be helpful to others. I would not have even been helpful to you last week because I was in such a bad place myself about what was happening. So now I'm in a place where I can at least talk about it, where I can be more useful to you and hear your thoughts on it and field your thoughts on it. And so that has been my emotional journey in the past week. I'm a man of color. I am also someone who is of mixed race. And so I see the world through a very particular perspective and a particular set of eyes. We all see the world from our own particular perspectives and eyes. And so I invite us to ask each other questions about that. I invite you to ask me about that and how I see things and experiences that I've had because of my perspective. And again, we have different perspectives, and that's okay. And it's good that we have different perspectives because we can learn from each other. Each one of you has a perspective that I don't. And I want to learn from that. We can learn from each other in a really powerful way. Does that make sense? And a big part of that is to first start having a dialogue, first having a conversation. So that is what we're doing today. Some of you have already started to do that. Some of you have started to do that with your families. Some of you have been doing that with your families before this week as an ongoing conversation. So I invite that conversation. Again, I want us to lean in to that conversation because it's often uncomfortable and awkward, especially if you have not had it consistently and frequently. Does that make sense? So that is, first of all, what I wanted to say. Tolerance. So there's a lot in tolerance, right? That we tolerate different people and their differences. To me, I would never want to know that my best friend tolerates me, right? That would be hard to know. Like, that word means that you are just kind of biting your tongue and you are just waiting for the moment that you leave the room, right? Because I have tolerated you for this whole afternoon, right? And so we shouldn't just tolerate each other. Shouldn't just name all of these things that we say we accept, right? There's so much more power in celebrating each other's differences, in honoring each other's differences. That's so different than I tolerate you, right? Thoughts on that? What do you think? I'll tell you a quick story as quickly as I can. I know I often talk a lot. So, um, when I was in college, and this was only about 10 years ago, and I dated a girl who was white, and her parents did not believe in interracial dating. And again, this was just 10 years ago, and they were very strict about it. They had family meetings among themselves about this. The father was angry, was throwing stuff, was like, because we were dating. Just that fact. Did not like that because we were dating. Let me see how I can tell this story. So this girl and I, we met through theater. I was a theater kid. I was always in the different shows. And we were in a show called Trojan Women. And I was one of the military officers in Trojan Women. And so I guess I have like a gruff voice. I could be that's a consistent thing with me. In theater, I've been a military officer. And so afterwards, her parents knew that she was dating me, and all they knew was that I was the black guy in the show they saw, because her parents saw that show. And they refused to meet me for the first 7 months of our relationship. Refused to meet me. Her sister was getting married. So we started dating in January. The wedding was in August. And it became July. And I was the wedding date. And it became, you should really meet him before the wedding, because that would be a strange thing to meet him at the wedding and have you blow up and ruin a wedding because I am of mixed race. What an awful thing to have. So what they then sat down and showed them a picture of me, right? And said, well, the sister sat down and said to the father, I don't know why you're so mad. This is the quote. I don't know why you're so mad. He's not even that black. Yeah, David, exactly. Good. Yeah. I don't know why you're so mad. He's not even that black. To which he said, absolutely not. I know what I saw. I know this. And then they decided to show a picture of me. Now, in the show that I was in, this Trojan Women show, I was a military officer, right? There was another black actor named Isaiah. Sweetest guy in the world. He is jacked out of his mind. Like, very strong, very big, very gruff in your face. He's a sweetheart. He's one of the kindest people that I met in college. But physically, he looks very intimidating, right? For the entire 7 months, the father thought that I was that guy. And thus would not meet with me, didn't want to talk with me, period. Just by seeing a picture of me and what I look like, that I don't look that black, that I don't act that black, whatever that means. There's so much in that statement. Do you hear what I'm saying? There is so much in that statement worth unpacking, right? And he then immediately decided that he was comfortable to meet with me. Because now he saw a picture, he saw that I was not Isaiah, and wanted to meet with me. Now, my girlfriend at the time didn't understand why I was unhappy. She called me, she was so excited. She was like, oh, we had this conversation with my dad. He now wants to meet with you. She gave me the play-by-play. She was so excited, and I was so upset. And for me, it was like just being up at bat, right? I was just being a human being. I was just being acknowledged as someone worthy of sitting at a table with you. And the reason that I was worthy was because I'm not that black. Do you hear what I'm saying? And for me, being someone of mixed race who has been told that so much of his life, this is something we could have a larger conversation about being too black, too white, as someone who's mixed race, that's something that's constantly a thing. And so that struck a nerve that is similar to how I've been saying that it's not just about this one event this past week. It's about a pattern. It's about a systemic pattern that is generational, right? That is something that isn't just this one conversation or this one tragic instance. It's something that transcends. It's something that is pervasive. That's a bigger word, but it's something that is something that happens often, right? So that is just one story. Again, about how I was tolerated. I dated her for longer than that, right? I then met the family. I went to the wedding. I went on family vacations with them. And there was in the pit of my heart a sense that I was being tolerated while I was there. That's something that never got away. You don't erase 7 months worth of being told we won't talk to you because of your race, and having nothing to do with how you treat our daughter, having nothing to do with who you are, not even hearing about you. We're not even going to sit down with you because of your race, because of who your parents happen to be, right? So that is one story I could tell you. That was a lot. I apologize. But I think that's something that should be heard. And again, it's about having difficult conversations. I told that story more easily because I've talked about it. I talk about this. This is something that I traffic in the conversation of race, about race. I talk about that with my friends, with my family, with my sister. We both have similar, we have literally the same genes. So, we have this very similar ways that we look at life. But we're also different because we're different people. And so I, again, invite you to lean in to those conversations with your family, with your friends, with the people around you. You may find that they have more stories to tell you than you even realize. So I just talked for about 5 minutes. I'm going to mute myself. For putting yourself in someone else's, that's called. What's the one word for putting yourself in someone else's shoes? It starts with an E.
Empathy?
Yes, absolutely. Empathy. Tafamazi, who was that? So, empathy. Empathy is really important, to put yourself in someone else's perspective, to try to see through their eyes, right? Like what Atticus Finch talked about with putting yourself, walking in someone else's skin for a mile, right? Being able to try to see what it would be like to be them. That is so powerful and important to this conversation, right? And that goes for all of our differences, whether it's, like I said, race, religion, sexual orientation, language, the different languages we may speak, the different cultures we may have, the different body images, right? If we are able to put ourselves in someone else's shoes, then we can really think about the words we say, right? We can really think about the actions we take, right? Like if my girlfriend's father had thought for a moment, what if I were told I'm not good enough for 7 months? Would he have thought differently? would the sister have used a phrase like "he's not that black" if it were put on her, right? Like, if you think about the words you use and the impact of those words if they were turned around, and having that ability is so important. And that's what empathy is all about. And there is never enough of it. We can always do more of it. We can always learn more about each other and talk more and start that dialogue. Does that make sense? Um, I want to thank everybody for coming here, for having this conversation, right? This is something that, like I said, is like a muscle, that is like a skill, that is an ongoing conversation. The more times you talk about it, the better you get at talking about it. And I invite you to talk with your friends, to talk with your family members, to talk with your loved ones, to talk with someone you trust about this, how you feel, what you're thinking, what questions you're having. Because, again, this is an ongoing conversation. This is not something that's just going to be here and gone in a day or a week or a month, right? It took many, many, many years for us to get here, and it'll take a lot of work to unknot all of the ugliness we see in the nation. Does that make sense? And having those conversations is a big part of that. Being, the young people that you are that can make that change, you're in so much of a position to do that. You are not powerless in that. So having those conversations is important. Continuing to have them, starting them, right? Making sure that you're not silent. There is a great quote from Elie Wiesel. Does anyone know him? Has anyone here ever read the book Night or know the book Night? Elie Wiesel is someone who survived a concentration camp as a teenager. So he writes about his personal experiences. It's a book that is very powerful. I read it recently in the past year, and it's something that I've read in the past. And even every time I read it, even as someone who is as old as I am and who has read it often, it still hits me in a really powerful way. So if you choose to look into him or his book, I would do so knowing that. But he has a quote that silence always helps the oppressor. It never helps the oppressed. So we talk about that when we talk about the bystander effect. And we have a lot of advisories about it. But if you're in a locker room and someone's making a comment about somebody else and you don't say anything, all you do is help the person who was making the comment, and you don't give any help to the person on the receiving end of that comment, whether it's something that is about their body type, or it's about their race, or it's about their religion, or it's about their sexual orientation. Again, all those ways that we're different, there are really disgusting ways that we've chosen to say it to each other. And if you stay silent, all you do is help the people who are oppressing and not the people who are oppressed. Does that make sense? Yeah. So, again, that gets to empathy, putting yourself in that other person's shoes. That's, again, a skill to work at and think about and to continue to think about. So I thank you for having this conversation, for having the courage to have it, for having a mature conversation in a mature way. So we were all very respectful. We all followed those norms. We were present. We were respectful. We leaned in. We shared a lot. I wish that we had even more of these as conversations about not only just race, but all those difficult topics, right? And this should be, if this isn't a conversation you've already been having, I hope this is the beginning of an ongoing conversation that, again, you have with your loved ones and with your friends and with the people around. So if you feel comfortable to share with me, I open that. I'm very welcoming to that. So if you want to send me a message, if you have a thought, if you have something you're thinking and feeling, I'm very open to hearing what you have to say. If you have a question, if you feel like you have a poem that you wrote, right? Any kind of expression, if it was a poem, if it's something you drew, if it's music that you've made or you've created or you're listening to, and you want to send that my way, feel comfortable to do so. I'm honored that you feel comfortable to do so, right? So this is, again, an ongoing thing. This is an ongoing talk, and I invite you to continue it on, right? So does anyone have any final thoughts, any final, I know I talked about a lot of questions, so anything from any of the previous questions, anyone have any final things they want to say?